threw a party in the county jail. The prison band was there, they began to wail. The band was jumping and the drum began to swing. You should have heard the knocked out jailbird sing and rock.
Tonight, intimate stories of an American legend, Elvis Presley, 70 years after his birth, with family, close friends, even a longtime girlfriend, an ex-lover. With us tonight, Elvis's best buddies, the Memphis Mafia. Marty Lacker, who knew Elvis since junior high, was co-best man at his wedding, served as the King's bookkeeper and secretary. Lamar Fike, Elvis's tour manager, so close to Elvis, he even tried to go into the army with him, but couldn't. Jerry Schilling still finds it hard to discuss all the time he spent with Elvis. Also, Elvis's stepbrother, David Stanley, at Elvis's Graceland mansion the day he died. Anita Wood, who dated Elvis seriously for years in the 50s, even lived for a time at Graceland. And Patty Perry, who knew Elvis for so long she was the only woman, officially or unofficially, in the Memphis Mafia. Private memories, personal stories of the King himself, the highs and the lows, next on Larry King Live. Outstanding panel, others joining us later. We'll also include your phone calls. Let's go around first with the Mafia members. Marty Lacker is in Memphis, who first met, where did you first meet, junior high school?
No, last year high school, Larry. Yeah,
what was he like in high school?
Odd. He was sort of a loner. I had, the thing that we had in common, because we weren't that close, I had just moved from New York, and Elvis dressed in very flashy clothes, which was different than the kids back then. Most of the guys back then wore crew cuts and Levi's and T-shirts, and Elvis wore flashy clothes. Wore his collar up, his hair was a lot longer than the rest of the people, and basically I dressed the same way coming from New York, and the kids used to kid us about who was going to outdress who the next day.
Was he singing then?
He sang in a couple of talent shows in Memphis, but I mean at the school, but it really wasn't known back then except for people who were close to him.
Patty, how did you meet him?
I met Elvis in Los Angeles. I was 17 years old driving down the street on Santa Monica Boulevard in an old clunker Buick, and we saw this black Rolls Royce. I was with a girlfriend. We were going to a fraternity party. I said, let's go see who's in that Rolls Royce. I said, damn. I said, it's Elvis Presley. I said, pretend we don't know who he is. So we pulled up next to him, and he rolled down the window. And I said, gee, you look familiar. Do I know you from somewhere? And he knew that we knew who he was. So he said, pull over. And from that 1 minute in time changed your whole life. We just bonded. He asked me up to the house, and he couldn't get rid of me.
Were you like an unofficial Mafia member of
Well, I was like little sister. These guys brought me up, Marty and Lamar and Jerry.
You did his hair, right?
I did his hair sometimes. Larry Geller did his hair a lot, but I did his hair for the Aloha special.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, he looked gorgeous.
More as we swing around.
They couldn't get rid of me, you know.
Lamar Fike was a member, a close personal friend. You directed all the concert tours, Lamar?
No, not really. I traveled with him, Larry. It was a case of, I did most of the lights in Vegas, and I'd go, when I went on the road, I'd do some of it, but, you know, mainly we were there to kind of keep everything together. At times we didn't, but it was still fun trying.
What was he like to work with?
At times, very difficult, but most of the time, he was a lot of fun. You know, you're around somebody like him 24 hours a day, and you really got to watch what you're doing because you become a little too familiar, and you say things you shouldn't, and sometimes you get in arguments, and it was a constant amount of pressure. It never really stopped. It kept you on your toes.
Jerry Schilling, you were a close family friend. Was there did you call yourself a Memphis group? Actually, or are we calling you the Memphis Mafia?
Well, it came about, Larry, I think, wear low-hair suits and carry guns, and the press kind of affectionately started calling us, well, the Memphis Mafia is back in town. And we kind of liked it, we were young guys.
How many people were involved in the Memphis Mafia?
Normally 6 to 7 at one time. Probably over the years, there's been about 12, 13 guys.
Did you hang out together?
Oh, we lived together, Larry.
Were they hangers-on? Did he support you guys?
Well, it kind of looks that way from the outside, but on the inside, it was very important. First of all, he didn't go out and hire people because they were an accountant or a tour manager. He hired people that he trusted, and then you worked into the position.
Oh, so you learned on the fly.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So trust was more important to him than...
It was the most important.
loyalty.
Yeah.
Well,
Patty?
Larry, we were a family, you know. I mean, Elvis was a prisoner of his own fame, and we were the ones that always hung out with him. I mean, he couldn't go anywhere. There were like 20 girls outside the gate 24/7. But we were his family, and we had so much fun together, and these guys were his best friends, you know. I mean,
Did you like him a lot?
I loved him. He was an incredible man. You know, he had guys that worked with him that were Italian. He had Jewish guys. He had Christian guys, and he always wore a Jewish star and a cross because he didn't want to get shut out of heaven on a technicality. I mean, he was a funny man. We were his friends, you know. We were it. And all he asked back was our friendship and loyalty.
David, you were his stepbrother, so he was how old when you met him?
Gosh, Elvis was 25 years old. I moved into the Graceland Mansion in 1960 after my mother, who was divorced, married Elvis's widowed father. So when I met Elvis Presley, I didn't know what a hound dog was. I didn't know what a king was. And it was funny, when I met Elvis, I met most of these guys. I mean, Marty Lacker and Lamar Fike. I mean, you know, this is like a little hoedown down south with the family. And, you know, I walked in and I was the little 4-year-old snotty kid who just couldn't comprehend what was going on. But I did understand one thing. I had come from a boarding home and moved into Graceland, and I thought, this is going to be a great ride. And it really was. It was a great ride. It was a lot of good friends and a lot of bonding. And, you know, we stood up for each other. We took up for each other. And it's you know, it's so cool to be able to sit down and see my buddies and all of us get together and talk about Elvis and celebrate Elvis's birthday.
Was he a good, big stepbrother?
Oh, yeah. Are you kidding? I mean, I got a lot of attention being driven to school in a pink Cadillac every day, you know. And, I mean, when Elvis is your big brother, he was more like a father figure. He was 20 years older than I was. He taught me everything. He taught me music. He taught me how to be cool. If there's any cool there, it came from Elvis. He taught me about girls. He taught me about spiritual matters. And all the other individuals involved. It just wasn't Elvis. You know, we're like those veterans, like World War II or Korean veterans or Vietnam veterans. We all experienced this unique thing, and like I said, it's so cool to get together and to communicate on the level that we can about somebody that we knew and loved so well.
Now, Marty, you must be the same age, right?
I was 2 years younger than him. We both were born in January. And I got to say this about hangers-on, and we've been called every name in the book. But we've been called those names by people who have no understanding of what that relationship was about.
What was it?
It was a close brotherhood. Elvis didn't have one best friend. He had about 9 of them. And those were basically the guys from the early years. And we grew up together. We were like brothers. And the people who make statements like that, I mean, we just smile and laugh because they have no idea what it was all about.
Were you the last one to sort of join, Patty?
No, actually, I was there before David and Ricky. They were babies when they came to the house. I met Elvis when I was 17. He was 25 years old. He just got out of the Army. And but I met Martin.
You in, too.
Yeah,
right?
They just couldn't get rid of me.
Were you the only girl in this?
We tried.
They tried. Well, I was the only female. I mean, he trusted me. I mean, we were good friends. I mean, there was no romance there. I mean,
Did
they
you
brought
want
me
a romance?
No. These
No, we
guys
all
were my
took
brothers.
shots.
No, they were my brothers. You know, they brought me up. They raised me. You know, they took care of me. They wouldn't let anybody near me, Larry, unfortunately.
Was he difficult, Lamar? Could he be difficult?
Yeah. That's probably the nicest term you can think of. It when he got hard-nosed, you knew he was there. He could make it hard on you. You know, so it's just like I said. It's hard to really separate the lives. You know, you're friends and you're an employee and you're all the above. My thing was we just fought all the time. You know, and I always lost. I got fired about 500 times, but you know, it's all part of it.
Right. He was extraordinarily, correct, Jerry, generous.
Very generous. Larry, the home I live in today, he bought me in '74.
Just...
You know, I think, Larry, this is how sensitive he was. He didn't talk about it, but I think he knew that I lost my mother when I was a year old. We grew up in the same neighborhood, poor part of Memphis. And in 1974, he said, you know, you never had a home. I want to be the one to give it to you. And nobody knew about it. The guys knew it, you know, but, you know, it wasn't for publicity, and I still live there, and I'll always live there.
Wow. Patty?
People, you know, they talk about birthdays and what how he celebrated his birthday and Christmas. Elvis didn't celebrate just regular holidays. Elvis would give you gifts off the cuff. You know, if he went to the jewelry store, everybody got something. If he bought a car, everybody got one. If he got motorcycles, everybody got one. But what made him happy is to see the look on your face when he gave you that gift.
Larry,
it wasn't the gift itself.
there's another thing, too, that's really important, is that he also gave you time. You know, you hear about the gifts, you hear about the monetary, but you could have a problem.
He would spend time with you?
He would say, do you want to talk about it? He'd come in your room. I mean, he was really a friend.
Who helped him with his project?
That's the problem.
David, was he generous to you?
He was very generous to me, and I think, listening to Jerry talk about the house that he lives in today, you know, my father was swept out of my life when I was a kid. My mother and father divorced in '59. When I moved into Graceland with my two older brothers, I came in with Elvis's new stepmother, Dee, which was my mother. And Elvis was a little reluctant towards my mother because he had just lost his mother. But he looked over at me and he picked me up and he gave me a hug and he welcomed me into his family. And he took me in and he shared his life with me. And he knew that my dad had been swept out of my life, and he did that replacement thing. And Jerry's so right about that. He was so silent about that. He went the extra mile to make you feel special. You know, there's a few people in the world that can pat you on the back and you're good for another 10,000 miles. One of them is a friend of mine, an associate named Bernie Dorman out of IBI in Los Angeles that I work with. The other, bar none, was Elvis Presley. When he patted you on the back, you were good for another 10,000 miles. And I'm sure all the guys on the panel will attest to the same thing.
Well, Larry,
Marty, was he generous with you?
Oh, definitely. But I'll tell you something, that because Elvis was a complex and contradictory type of person. I mean, he had many sides to him. Elvis could not really bring himself to say, I'm sorry to anybody. If he got mad at him or did something that he knew he shouldn't have done, and he'd get over it in 30 minutes. But
he'd give you a card
instead of saying, I'm sorry,
That's right.
Instead of saying, I'm sorry, he'd buy you something.
Great way to say I'm sorry.
The only time I ever heard him say I'm sorry is he said it to me because of an argument, the one and only argument we ever had, and it shocked me when he did it. Because he just didn't do that. He'd go buy you something.
Lamar, despite all the arguments, was he generous to you?
To say the least. I went through a lot of cars. You know, it was, you know, we got on the motorcycle tear. You know, I had a motorcycle and ran it under a bus and, you know, things like that. And it was like a big playground that really got serious at times. But you know what? Somebody asked me the other day, said, would you do it over again? I said, when do we start?
Yeah, ain't that the truth?
Is it true that he would keep movie theaters open all night and take all you guys to see movies?
He would keep us up.
We would go like three movies a night. We'd go at 12 o'clock after it closed.
And we had no TV then. I mean, we had no.
You know, we would talk out loud. It was interesting, Larry, because I think about it now, and how you sat in the movie theater with Elvis was the relationship at the time.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
you're kidding.
Is that right, guys?
Yeah, the funny line, the lines are the greatest lines in the world. Yeah.
There was never spoken, but it just kind of worked that way.
He had his row, and then everybody else sat behind.
But you know what else?
You know, Elvis studied those movies. You know, I used to wonder, God, why are we watching this for 3 times, you know? And then you would see some little eclectic thing that he picked up from that movie in his next movie.
What were you going to say? Who was talking? I'm sorry, was it you?
That was me.
Yeah, go ahead.
One of the things about him is he'd hardly ever watch one of his movies.
We never watched it.
He did a couple of times, but only about 2 or 3 that I knew over 20 years. He didn't like to see himself on the screen.
We'll ask in a minute what you each think might have been his strangest habit. Quick Elvis Presley story. I never met Elvis, met Colonel Parker, but Elvis Presley worked in Miami Beach once at the Miami Beach Convention Center. He flew into Miami International Airport. A helicopter brought him over to Miami Beach at the helipad. A limo picked him up at the helipad and drove him 10 blocks to the convention center where he performed. He got back in the limo to go back to the helicopter. When he got back to the helicopter, he said to the limo driver, do you own this limo or do you work for the company? And he said, I work for the company. And he said, you now own it. The limo driver's tip was the limo. We'll be right back.
Elvis Presley é o único artista presente em 3 halls da fama: rock, country e gospel. Ele é o mais vendido da história da indústria fonográfica, tem o maior número de fã-clubes ativos no mundo e sua popularidade permanece intacta até hoje. Graceland, famosa mansão de Elvis, é um verdadeiro foco de peregrinação internacional. Mais de 500 mil pessoas visitam o lugar por ano para conhecer as lembranças do ídolo, preservadas como relíquias.
Were you very close to your father?
Yes.
It was a daddy-daughter kind of thing?
Yeah, very much.
What was he like as a father?
Very, you know, adoring, very sweet, very, I mean, I knew that he was crazy about me.
Did you know what he was to the world at 9?
Yeah, you know, in some weird way, I definitely got sort of grooved into the whole idea early on. So I don't know how that happened. He just kind of, that was my life. I didn't know any different.
Joining us now is Anita Wood. She's in Jackson, Mississippi. She dated Elvis for several years, from 1957 to 1962. In fact, it was Lamar Fike, one of our other guests, who arranged that. Is that right, Anita, for you to meet him?
Yes, Lamar called me. He did.
And?
For Elvis.
And what did he say?
Well, I was working with Wink Martindale on a teenage show there in Memphis. And when the show was over, Lamar called and said, Elvis would like to meet you tonight. Well, I had a date, and so I wouldn't break it. And Lamar went ballistic. I never will forget that, Lamar. He'd go, so you won't go with Elvis Presley, break your date. But I couldn't do that, so I didn't go, and I didn't think I'd ever hear from him again, but I did.
What was the first date like?
Well, it was a little unusual. There was Lamar and George and Alan Fortas and Cliff Gleaves and Louis. They were all in the car, and George Klein. And George came to the door, and the lady I lived with at the time made Elvis come to the door and pick me up. We were a Southern family, you know. And so he came to the door and picked me up. We went out in the limousine, and Elvis was driving. And we drove around Memphis a lot. We stopped by a hamburger place and sent Lamar in for I don't know how many dozens of hamburgers, Lamar. Lots of them. And they ate every one of them. And then we went to Graceland. He had just bought Graceland, and he wanted to show me in Graceland. And we went out there.
Did he try to lure you the first night?
Lure.
Yeah,
It's a new word, lure.
Lure.
I'm old myself. Lure.
Lure. Larry, lure. Yeah.
Did he make a
yeah,
move?
but anyway, he tried.
My dinner,
He wanted me to go upstairs and see his bedroom and his big, magnificent bed, which I did. And we walked in the bedroom, and it was a huge bed. I mean, the biggest bed I've ever seen, bar none, even now. Huge bed. And then he tried to make a little move on me, and I said, no, really, I have to go home now. So he took me home, and that was the first date we had. He was a gentleman about it.
What was he like to be in love with? I imagine you were in love with him.
I was. He was my first love. I met him when I was 19 years old, and I came from a very conservative family, and I'd never gone steady or anything. So, of course, when I met Elvis, I did fall in love with him, and he did with me. We had a wonderful time, great fun together. I love the guys. And
What's that?
Elvis cheated on every woman he was with. Both of the women we've interviewed who were with him discussed it. He had one woman on one hotel and another one on the next floor. And they all loved him, and they all understood. So, Lamar, you explain that to me.
Larry, it's called the lure.
It didn't bother people.
Well, you know, look, I'll tell you something. There was a lot to go around. You know, he wanted to keep everybody happy. But it was the lure, Larry.
It was the lure. He obviously did. And now joining us in Los Angeles is Cathy Westmoreland. Cathy dated and fell in love with Elvis, wrote a book about their relationship called Elvis and Cathy. Why did you break up?
Well, I didn't have too much to say in it. No, I mean, actually, yeah.
Kathy, give us a B flat.
A B flat. Someone asked for me to give them a B flat. I dated him for about 6 months on a regular basis, and then it became obvious to me that there were other women, and it just was, well, you know how that is.
What was he like as a date?
He was fabulous. It was fun. He was very thoughtful, almost motherly.
He didn't sleep, right?
No, he was, he suffered from insomnia. He was very much, I think a lot of geniuses are like that. Just can't turn it off, is what he would say.
Miss him?
Yeah, I have trouble sleeping, too. I do.
Let's go around and discuss eccentricities. What Jerry was different about, what was weird about, if that's the right term, about Elvis? All great men have eccentricities.
Well, you know, Larry, I met Elvis when I was 12 years old. He was 19. And it was before he even had a hit record in Memphis. And there was 5 older guys trying to get up. This is how unpopular he was, trying to get up a football game. So they let the kid in grade school, they let me play. And I remember walking into the huddle, and I was really into James Dean and Brando, and I walked into the huddle, and he looked so, he was them and everything else. It was just the look, it was like he was a rebel, but he had this lovable smile. He was like a lovable rebel.
What, Patty, was to you an eccentricity of Elvis's?
Well, everything about Elvis was an eccentricity, but he was a baby boy, though. You know, he talked baby talk, you know. He loved his mommy. Thank you, Neil.
Talked baby talk?
Talked baby talk to the women. You know, the women saw a different perspective of Elvis than the guys did, you know.
So when like baby talk, you mean goo goo gaga?
Yeah, well, no, but he called Lisa Lisa.
Good try, Larry. Good try.
but he you know, he was nocturnal. You know, we were like vampires. We stay up all night and sleep all day, you know.
Marty, what was weird,
Well,
for want of a better term?
I'll tell you something that was weird about him. If he watched a football game on TV, he wore a helmet.
He dressed for every occasion. Dressed for every occasion. He'd get on the airplane with a helmet and goggles.
If he watched guys on TV riding motorcycles, he'd have his motorcycle helmet on. And you'd walk in, and it looked funny. I mean, you'd walk in, and there he's sitting with a football helmet on. And you'd say, "Good Lord, Elvis, what are you doing?" You know, I'm watching the game.
Lamar, would he have been a good guest on this show?
He would have been hilarious. You know, if he'd had the group around him, that's when it really got funny. You know,
Exactly, that's when he had the most fun.
He needed that sort of, you know, support, and when he had it, it was every man for himself. I mean,
What Lamar to you was eccentric?
I think the most eccentric thing about Elvis was really is the way he treated people. He treated everybody equal. I mean, there was no up or down with him. I mean, it was essentially, you know, it's like, I think, you know, it's like God loves a buzzard as much as he does an eagle, you know, and I think it was a case of, Elvis treated everybody like that, you know. I'm almost positive that was it. But if it's an eccentricity, I don't know. I don't think so.
And Larry, that was a great lesson for us, because if Elvis Presley could treat a guy that sweeps the streets the same way he treated a corporate CEO and was nice to him, so could we.
There were like 2 Elvis Presleys. When Elvis was at home, he was Elvis Presley. But when he got on stage, that was a different Elvis Presley. That's what he loved to do. And but they were talking about, he liked people to notice him. We'd drive down Sunset Boulevard at rush hour, and he'd drive the car just to see the look on the people's face when they saw it was him driving.
drive?
Yeah, he'd drive, yeah.
And in the limo, if he wasn't driving, he would stand up in the sun view, or the moon view, stand up and wave at everybody. You're talking to people.
He was a character, man. He
Did
was a
all
character.
of you know about the drug problem?
Yeah.
Yes, we
Sure
did.
we did.
Absolutely.
How can you avoid it?
Would anyone try to help him?
Well, Larry,
Everybody.
over the years, of course. And you know, it's
can only
real
help
hard
yourself,
to
Larry.
it's real hard to help somebody who wants to be the helper.
Did
you know,
you see it coming?
You have to
Yes
remember,
and
too,
no.
at that
You know,
time.
when you live it on a day-to-day basis, it's harder to see. And also, it was prescription. It was given by doctors.
Exactly.
It was, you know, Elvis wasn't a street drug guy.
There were no Betty Ford clinics in those days. No one realized how dangerous prescription drugs were.
Why did he let himself go so much, though?
You
Lamar?
don't.
Why does...
You know, Larry, it's not a case of letting yourself go. What happens is you're so engulfed in all of this style that, you know, you do it and it becomes all of a sudden you are there. You're heavy, you know, and you're miserable. You're not happy.
Well, and I think that goes back. I think that goes back to what I was saying a minute ago, Larry. Watching Elvis be Elvis. There were many times in Elvis's life he felt like he didn't deserve the money and fortune and fame that he got. And I think sometimes as a result of that, he went into that self-destructive spirit. I mean, the prescribed medication is what it was, absolutely. But that prescribed medication eventually caught up with him.
It scared us all to death. It really,
A lot of things have been said about Elvis's death and what happened and those responsible. But Marty's right. I mean, Elvis was ultimately responsible for himself. We could only take care of him as much as we could. And on that tragic day on August 16th, when I walked in that bathroom and saw him gone, nobody hurt as much as I did or the people on this panel. But the fact is we couldn't stop him, you know. I'm working on a film project, and the premise is we protected the king from everything but the king himself. And, you know, that's the tragedy. You know, we miss him so much here at his 70th birthday, but the only way it could have been prevented, Marty, that's so right on. You know, Elvis could have made the choice, and unfortunately, he made the wrong one.
You've given us all a great hour, and I thank you very much. Our thanks, too, to Warner Home Video and Paramount Home Entertainment for the movie clips you've seen on our show tonight. All of the titles we've shown are all available on DVD.
Ain't gonna stop until I shake his hand. Rock me, Lord, come on, man.